At the mouth of the harbor in Charleston, South Carolina, sits a fort. Covering just less than 2.5 acres, it is not a very large fort, but the role it would play in the watershed moment of American history was huge, and it would be an eyewitness to incredible events taking place around it. It was here in Charleston that secession began. Finding the election of President Abraham Lincoln intolerable, South Carolina declared the Union dissolved. The new Republic of South Carolina lasted almost 2 months before it joined the even newer Confederate States of America. It was here that U.S. Army Major Robert Anderson moved his small garrison of approximately 80 Federal soldiers across a mile of water in the middle of the night. They left an indefensible Fort Moultrie for an as-yet incomplete Fort Sumter. His men immediately began making the fort ready for combat, just in case this new Cold War suddenly turned hot. It was here that the giant American flag flying over Fort Sumter was rent asunder by strong winds on April 11th. The very next day, the nation would be rent asunder by war. It was here that the war began. At 4:30 in the morning of April 12, 1861, a mortar shell fired by Confederates at nearby Fort Johnson exploded over Fort Sumter. It was a signal shot to the other Confederate batteries on the surrounding islands to open fire. After standing at the precipice for 4 months, America plunged into the abyss of civil war. It was here that the Confederates, after agreeing to terms of evacuation with Major Anderson, took control of Fort Sumter. They would hold it for almost the entirety of the war. It was here that Fort Sumter witnessed the Union Navy establish a blockade outside of the harbor. Inside of 1 year, it experienced an attack by Union ironclads, an assault by Marines and sailors, and had its once formidable walls reduced to rubble. It would also witness the first successful submarine attack in history. Meanwhile, a mile and a half away on Morris Island, the 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment, comprised of black soldiers led by white officers, would prove what everyone should have already known, that the black man could fight and die as well as any other man. It was here that the Confederates, having had their lines of communication and supply cut off by General William Tecumseh Sherman, abandoned Fort Sumter and Charleston on February 17, 1865. Less than 2 months later, General Robert E. Lee surrendered to General Ulysses S. Grant at an obscure little village in Southside Virginia called Appomattox Courthouse. The war was effectively over. The war would change everything. The American concept of nationhood would change, and with abolition, American society would change. The American flag assumed new meanings, and the newly freed slaves would be made citizens of the nation which had for so long held them in such oppression, and the long march to true equality would begin. The trajectory and history of the nation would change, and along with it, that of the world's. So come and make your pilgrimage to this most remarkable and hallowed site, and journey back in time to when all these events still lay in the future. This is where it all begins. This is where everything changes. This is Fort Sumter.
Hi folks, and welcome to Fort Sumter. On behalf of the National Park Service, we're glad you could visit today. So Fort Sumter started construction in 1829. It was a big project, but it progressed very slowly. The ultimate goal of Fort Sumter would be a fort 50 feet tall, all the way around, and it's a basic pentagon, but you would have cannons on 3 levels on 4 sides of the fort.
These bricks that you see here, known as Charleston gray bricks, somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 6 million of these bricks, all handmade here in Charleston by slaves on plantations. 1860, South Carolina decides that it no longer wants to be part of the United States, and they decide to secede from the Union.
But do you think the people back then really felt the weight of what was to come? Do you think they really understood how serious this was? Some of them did, but many of them did not. Now, in the present, we can talk about it forever. We know a lot they didn't. We know the war that started right here ended up lasting 4 long years. We know that in that time, hundreds of thousands of lives were lost, Americans.
"34 hours after the initial shots, Anderson decides that he should probably do the right thing for his troops, live to fight another day. 44,000 shells will be shot at Fort Sumter by the Union, making this one of the most bombed areas of North America.
Various Union armies marched in, planted the stars and stripes, and the once hated cradle of secession is once again under the United States flag. Hello again, folks. We're back at Fort Sumter. It's Ranger Gary. We previously talked about one of Fort Sumter's original guns, a 42-pound smoothbore that we have mounted near our entrance on a period wooden carriage in one of our gun rooms or casemates. We're going to talk about a next evolution of smoothbore guns. And again, when I say smoothbore, if you look down the inside of the gun, it's smooth all the way down the inside. Therefore, it's going to fire. It's restricted to firing a round cannonball. Now, as you can see, that the old 42-pounder cast in 1846 is kind of grown by considerable length and weight. This cannon here is commonly called, this series of cannons is commonly called Rodmans, after the Army officer that developed them, Thomas Rodman. And it's still a smoothbore, fires a round cannonball. Here, when you're dealing with something over 300 pounds, and this barrel is sitting on a iron carriage about 7 feet off the ground, things are going to be considerably more difficult. We're lucky if we're going to get off one shot every 4 to 5 minutes. So what would help us in loading this cannon, because everything's so heavy, is that when it's on its carriage, it would actually have a little crane with rope and pulley. And you would actually put a clamp on the side of the cannonball and hoist it up into the air until you're even with the front of the muzzle, and then push that big cannonball in. Now, these were really state-of-the-art guns for the day. Your distance being, it's a smooth bore, we're going to get a little bit over the 2-mile range. So it's a bump up from the 1.25 miles with a 42-pounder. So we're gaining a little bit of mileage, but still nothing spectacular. We're still not going 5-6 miles out. But face it, in a harbor like Charleston, or many harbors on our coastline, we just don't need the distance. So with an enemy ship within 2 miles, this is a great weapon. Could you imagine a cannonball this side heading at the waterline of an enemy ship? So the smoothbores, they did not go obsolete with the coming online of rifled guns. In fact, these made it all the way into the 1890s. So that is our largest land gun of the Civil War, your smoothbore Rodmans. Hey folks, just take a look at, well, what's stuck in the wall here at Fort Sumter. This is the backing of a 100-pound Parrott projectile. So it's a bullet-shaped projectile, say it's that long, that big around, and its original weight would have been 100 pounds. This came from a Union gun that was on Morris Island during the siege of Charleston, which started in the summer of 1863 and ran up pretty much up until the Confederates abandoned Charleston in February of 1865. A prolonged bombardment of these powerful rifled guns from a nearby island really spelt the doom for Fort Sumter. That's why there's so little of the original fort left today. Let's go take a look at the type of gun that actually fired this. We have some in the fort right down the road here. Hey folks, now we're going to take a look at our final type of cannon at Fort Sumter. And these are rifle guns. And this class of rifle gun is commonly called a Parrott. Not after the bird, but after the ordnance officer that invented this type of gun. So all of these were cast at the West Point Foundry at Cold Spring, New York in 1863. So actually these were middle of the war guns. And the set that we have of about a dozen right here actually made it down the coastline and were mounted on Morris Island. Now this gun has a 5-mile range. We started off with a 42-pounder that had about 1.25 mile range. Then we went to the 15-inch Rodman, the big one on the parade ground. We're talking about a little over 2-mile range. This, we're gonna double it. We can go 5 to 6 miles with this gun. And here's the key to it. The inside of the bore is rifled. If you look down the inside, you will see kind of like a candy cane type twist of bands going down the inside, kind of like a drill bit. This would fire a bullet-shaped projectile, not a round ball. If you put a round ball in a rifle gun, it just would not work. Once the powder bag ignites, the bullet-shaped projectile hugs the rifling of the bore and it puts a rapid spin on it. So actually it comes out of the front spinning like a football. And because it's spinning like a football and it's aerodynamic, it's gonna fly fairly straight as opposed to a round ball. And you're gonna get a distance of 5 miles on average from a gun like this. Sometimes 6, depending on good conditions. Earlier in the war, you had to be less than 2 miles away from your enemy to hit them. Now, you can commence with a long-range bombardment. So actually, rather than throwing manpower at Charleston, the Union Army wisely captured Morris Island and then commenced with the siege. So that's our tour of our main types of cannons at Fort Sumter, and hope you enjoyed it. Thank you. Hello and welcome to Fort Sumter. On behalf of the National Park Service, we're glad you could visit us today. My name's Ranger Gary, and we're going to first start off talking about cannons, because cannons was what Fort Sumter was all about. So this is believed to have been one of the original 60 or so guns that was present in the fort before the war started. It was cast in Boston in 1846, and it's called a 42-pounder, and it was common in the pre-Civil War years to designate cannon by the type, the weight of the cannonball that it fired. So let's demonstrate first how the basic workings of a cannon. We're walking up to our cannon. First, we're going to check the barrel, make sure that it's empty. Okay? I'd maybe run a worm, a little twisty type screw on a rod down there. We hear a clank, we know it's empty. We're trying to turn it around a little bit. So we definitely want to start with an empty gun. Never assume anything when working with muzzle loading cannons. Okay, so she's ready to go. We call up for the powder bag to come up from the chest, sewn up bag, linen bag of gunpowder. I'll be carefully put it in. I'm gonna put it in. Notice I'm from the side. I'm not here with my nose down the barrel, putting that bag of gunpowder in. I'm here from the side, just in case there's an accident. The blast is going that way, but my head's over here, right? If my head's here and an accident happened, well, I could play the headless horseman, right? So I'm gonna slowly put it in, slide it in, and then again from the side, the crewman with the ramrod will come in, insert the top here into the cannon. We're gonna go all the way down and all the way back, effectively seating the bag of gunpowder firmly at the end of the bore. Now, let's get that 42-pound cannonball up here. Gonna bring it up, and again from the side, put her in. Same thing with the ramrod, from the side, all the way down, all the way back. So we now have a firmly seated bag of gunpowder and a cannonball sitting right in front of it at the back of the bore. Now it's time to fire. Our vent pick, similar to an ice pick, we're gonna find the hole on top. We're gonna come up, and if that wasn't rusted through, we would go up and down, effectively puncturing a bag or a hole or holes in the bag of gunpowder sitting right in here. Okay, so we've got exposed gunpowder. Let's take our friction primer. Remember, this is our ignition device. Okay, we're gonna put that up in there. And then hook up our lanyard, basically like a long dog lead. From there to there, and I'm gonna get over here. When the commander of the gun yells fire, I'm gonna give it a good yank. You'll hear the kaboom, and off she goes. Jump on it immediately, sponge that barrel, and then you're ready to go again. Basics of firing a cannon.
Welcome. My name is Ranger Andy, and I've been asked to present some of the 5 points that we've developed to help keep your visit safe, informative, and safe for our cultural resource, Fort Sumter. First, the fort and its surrounding areas are non-smoking, so please leave all the materials for lit and unlit cigarettes put away during your visit here. Second, as you approach the gate of the fort from the ferry boat, you'll see a small grassy area with a path that runs through it. Feel free to wander along that path and see what you might find. However, don't leave that path. Don't step down into a marsh grass area or even further down onto the beach. That area is not part of your tour, and that's off limits. Third, artifacts. Everything at Fort Sumter is an artifact, whether it's a 50,000-pound cannon or a 2.5-ounce piece of brick that was handmade by slaves over 150 years ago. So please look at things, touch things with your hands, call your friends over and take pictures, but don't pick anything up, and certainly don't put anything in your pocket or bag. That would be a federal crime. Climbing. We have lots of things that are cool to climb on. We have cannons and brick walls, but we ask you, please don't climb on those. The majority of our accidents here that cause pain, suffering, and blood are related to people falling off of things they're not supposed to be climbing on. And additionally, all of our resources here at the park are irreplaceable. And so if we have 300,000 visitors a year that are jumping up on the windowsill for a picture or sitting on top of the cannon for that perfect holiday greeting card shot, pretty soon we won't have any of our cultural resource left. And finally, falls. There is nothing flat or level about any place in Fort Sumter. So please keep your eyes where you're walking. If you're texting and walking, be prepared to see the dentist. And please look out for our barriers. We have barriers in several places to help keep you safe. We have bricks sometimes that fall down from above, and we have a small chain on the top level of the fort that's only about 16 inches off the ground. If you were to cross that chain, or maybe one of your toddlers toddled past it, they would fall 15 feet onto sharp rocks, and we don't want that to happen. So please stay on the safe side of the barriers, and if you have munchkin people, keep your eye on them. Thanks for listening, and enjoy your trip to Fort Sumter.